And a lot of times as entrepreneurs in small businesses, we're there to get it done, and we have bottom line to meet and we have things to do. But remembering that the people are literally what make your business.
Welcome to Biz Help for You, the show that saves you the expensive learning curve by providing advice from industry experts in every facet of the entrepreneurial journey. Too many small businesses collapse. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 20% fail within their first year, and less than 35% make it to their 10th anniversary. The goal of this podcast is to change that statistic. So if you're interested in learning more to be a successful entrepreneur, tune in today.
Now, let me tell you a little bit about my guest today. Andrea Johnson empowers executives and founders to lead with authenticity, conviction, and confidence, enabling them to positively impact their lives, organizations, and communities. Uncovering and understanding the significance of her core values is central to her process, allowing her clients to become impactful leaders. Her passion lies in equipping female leaders to define a new culture by trusting their own ability to think critically, create imaginatively, and lead effectively. You can learn how to move from imitating others' principles and priorities to defining your own for sustainable, impactful leadership using core values to lead with authority, conviction, and confidence. So, Andrea, welcome to the show.
Katie, thank you. That is a great bio. I'm like, where did you get that? It's beautiful.
Well, we might have taken some information and made our own. So
it was great.
But,
I'm gonna grab the transcript.
No, perfect. I'll send it to you. No, but basically the first question I want to ask you before we get into this topic really is, how did you begin even teaching these leadership skills to entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I have a long career. I'm a second career person, and my early career I finished at 22 years in university medical systems, administration and operations. And I did a lot of work in grant and research administration. So I dealt a lot with managing people and managing budgets. And I kind of got to the place where I was not happy doing either one of those anymore, because the definition of managing is to keep things steady. It's to keep the status quo. It's to maintain all of that. And I said to my husband one day, I said, I don't want to manage anybody else. And so when I turned 50, I just really started paying attention to, if I'm going to live 50 more years, I might need to do something else. And I'm just, like, maybe I'll live 50 more years, but that was a seminal year for me. I lost my mother to breast cancer, and our son was only 8. And I'm in Charlottesville, Virginia, and some big things happened in 2017 in August, and with racial stuff, and I got pneumonia, and it's just a lot. And it made me really think about what I wanted to do. And I remember sitting on the couch one day and I said, I just want to help people. Is there a job where I can just help people? Because in most of our work, we find ways to do that. Most entrepreneurs if you're a service-based entrepreneur, obviously you've got something that you serve others with, but I didn't quite know how I wanted to do it. And a friend of mine who I'd known since I was 15 said, have you ever looked at the John Maxwell team, where you could be a speaker, trainer, and coach, and a DISC consultant? And I said, who's John Maxwell? And what's funny is my husband, who's a small church pastor, knew exactly who John Maxwell was. And he's an internationally well-known leadership guru who actually works with countries to help them on their leadership. But at first I was like, I don't know, that doesn't sound like me. And the more I learned about myself, the more I realized, looking back, I said, oh, you know what? People come to me and sit in my office because I listen, and because it's a safe place for them. I even had a former staff member show up in the middle of a panic attack saying, you're the only safe place I knew to go. And I was in academic medicine at Johns Hopkins and the University of Virginia. And the chief of the division would come and sit in my office and talk to me about things. And the more I looked back, I realized, I can do this. And I've been a Sunday school teacher for a long time, but I never thought of myself as a teacher. And I'm very good at explaining things. I said I was a translator between the clinical people and the research people. When I started looking, anybody who's switched careers and become an entrepreneur after a long career in any field, probably has taken inventory of the skills and the strengths that they have. And when I started doing that, I realized that whole John Maxwell thing that my friend had mentioned was actually a really good fit.
Mm.
And so I started my certification in the becoming a speaker trainer coach in 2018 and was certified in March of 2019 and really learned a lot about the fact that there are very intentional ways that we can move forward in our business and in how we lead ourselves and how we lead others. And I've taken advantage for 5 years now of the programs offered, the mentorship offered. But when I started doing workshops, when I started digging deeper into what I have or what I needed to know about myself, the more I realized I teach from my own experience and I learn
Mhm.
from my own experience. And the more clients I work with, the more I realize this is what I'm really meant to do. And it
Mhm.
feels so much more fulfilling, even though as an entrepreneur, the ups and downs of the financial things are scary and you never, I mean, you can put systems in place, but there's always that question. But when I actually sit down with people and train a team or help somebody realize that they could actually do way more than they thought they could do, especially women, like you said, that's my passion because women, I think, tend to not think that way. When I do that, I feel a sense of accomplishment and a sense of fulfillment and proud of the work that I do. And it makes me realize, yeah, that was a good choice. And it took a little
Mhm.
while, but I continue to expand on it and with the resources that I am provided through the Maxwell team. And it's just been a really great journey.
Perfect. Well, I know we're going to talk core values today, obviously. And a lot of people, when they start a business, they don't think like I should really think through the core values that I want to embody in my company or those who I hire. They're thinking I need to provide a service or create my product. I need to start
Mhm.
marketing. I need to start getting revenue, and they don't really think through all of this. But why do you say that the core values are crucial for the
Hmm.
entrepreneurial success and how they can impact the growth and sustainability of a business?
Well, Candy, a lot of us come up through the ranks of high school or college or even a business like me leaving the university medical system. And we imitate other people's principles and priorities, whether we mean to or not. It may be conditioning, it may be, well, this is how you do it. And there are some
Mhm.
that we need to imitate. I'm also a profit first practitioner. So I know that there are things that I need to imitate. But a lot of times we start a business, especially a solopreneur, and
Mhm.
we go in, especially service business, we go into that kind of business and the goal is to do it in our way, right? Otherwise we would do
Mhm.
it in somebody else's company, right? So
Right.
the goal is to do it in my way. Well, if I don't know who I am and what I really stand for, then I can't really do it my way. You know,
Mhm.
most of us have gravitate towards working within in ways that honor our core values, but we don't always know what they are. And so it's a little bit like a stopped clock that's right twice a day or
Mhm.
a blind
Yeah.
squirrel finding a nut. We're like, oh, that was really good. How can I replicate it? And we don't know how. Right. And we
Mhm.
don't understand why we got to that place. So when we understand our core values and know who we are, then we can translate those into business mission and values. And it gives us the authority to act within the convictions that we have. It may be that one of the reasons why we become an entrepreneur is because we don't want to do it the way somebody else did it, or
Mhm.
I need a different business ethic. But it also means, like I shared, that I can enjoy and be empowered by my work because I'm doing work that honors my core values. It also gives me the ability to set boundaries, which most of us need to learn how to do, especially as entrepreneurs. So I think that fulfillment and understanding is incredibly important. And then
Mhm.
being able to take them as a solopreneur or a small business owner and translate them into what does it mean and how is that going to show up in the way I do my business, I think is super important.
Mhm. Well, and someone could be listening and thinking like, okay, well, I know like I'm a person of integrity, honesty
Mhm.
is going to be important, or, I'm a communicator and, that's going to be important. Like there's some things maybe that they could easily identify. There may be a little bit of a difficulty though for them to figure that out. But, how do you recommend that they go about actually identifying which core values are most important to them and how many core values should they have that they use for their business?
Sure. I started out with the Franklin Covey system. Are you familiar with that? A
Mm.
Franklin Planner system long ago. And I did my 10 governing values back 30 years ago. And what's interesting is that some of these are outside of me and some of them are they're values that I hold. And then some of them are who I am. And so the first
Mhm.
thing I help people understand is that the values that we show up with in our business are things, behaviors that we usually want to exhibit. Being a person of integrity can be both interior and exterior, but what I want people to know is that they have their own compass that helps them understand things. They have their own principles and priorities that guide how they're going to do it so that they can show up in a way that honors themselves. And then when we know what those are, we can take them into the business world and translate them into these are the ways that my company will do business. And the first thing to do is to look at, because I have an adopted ADHD son, and we had to learn what we call positive opposite parenting, meaning if we want him to stop doing something, we had to learn to tell him to do the thing we wanted. And
Mm.
it's just a great way to parent, and it's a great way to
Mhm.
manage people or to lead. But if we wanted him to stop running, we'd say use walking feet, little simple things like that. And so what I tell people is to start with, a lot of times like I said, we gravitate towards our core values, but we don't always live in a way that honors them all the time. So look for ways or areas of your life where you got upset a lot, or something that
Mm.
maybe something that really bothered you in the last situation that was like, what was the triggering point that made you leave your job and become an entrepreneur? What was that catalyst? Because underlying that negativity or that negative thought many times is what's not being honored in the core
Mhm.
value. For instance, if it's not being respected in the workplace, or feeling like nobody listens to your ideas, or you're not important, or that person, not the kind of stuff like this guy cut me off in traffic, those kind of things, that's just us being stressed out, right? But the
Right.
things that matter to us, the things that we kind of figure out or look at as kind of like, that's a non-negotiable. My husband's one of those
Mhm.
people, you don't lie to him. It's like you lie to him, it's like, we done. So when it's that kind of a really strong thing, then that's a good indication that we might be touching on a core value. It's a little bit like
Mm.
figuring out those nerves, right? And when I work with people, I try to get them down to a good top 10. And then we work on primary and secondary. So I say I like to have 3 to 4 primary,
Mm.
because I
Mhm.
think trying to constantly honor and rearrange and figure out how to do that with more than 3 or 4 can be daunting, and it's
Mhm.
probably overcomplicating things. But I like to look at it as I live on a country road here in Virginia, and we don't have sidewalks. So people, when they're walking, they will walk in my yard a lot of times. But those are my secondary core values. The ones that are out there in my yard, it's like
Mhm.
they're important to me, but I'm not going to yell at people to get off my yard. I mean, it's like they're walking,
Mhm.
right? It's like the people are more important. So if something else in my life can take precedence over that value that I have, or that thing that's important to me, then I say that it probably falls into a secondary category of core values. But the primary ones are kind of like my house. Nobody
Mm.
walks up and just walks in my door. They knock
Mhm.
and I open the door, right? So the primary core values are the ones that I say we don't bend on those, or if they get dishonored, we get really angry.
Mhm.
And we've all had those experiences, right? So I say I like to see if we can stick with the top 3. I have one entrepreneur I worked with that she just could not get it down to 3. And she's like, it has to be 4. I'm like, whatever, girl, like whatever works for you. And then she took those core values and literally rewrote them as mission and vision for her business. And so when you start looking at doing it right the first time, to quote an entrepreneur on HGTV, it's like, if you just do it right the first time, then you're in good shape. But even if you haven't done it right the first time, even if you're
Mhm.
5 years in and wondering why you're burnt out, 5 year or 10 years in and wondering, like, do I really love this business anymore? Then it's a really good time to just do a little reflecting and say, maybe I'm not running my business in a way, or maybe I'm not in a business that honors my core values. So it can
Mhm.
be good in both those situations.
So obviously, a lot of people are solo and they don't have team working with them,
Right.
and this is just for themselves. But for someone, maybe they're growing or maybe they do have team and they want to start implementing this because they haven't before. Like, how would they help identify in those potential candidates,
Hmm.
even that they have these core values without giving away that's what we're looking for, right? So that they'll
Hmm.
say, like, oh, yeah, I'm an honest person, or oh, yeah, I love to communicate, or whatever that might be, right? So, how do
Yeah.
they dig down deep enough to find out if these candidates have it without giving away what they're looking for?
Well, as a former hiring manager, this is a really good question. And I was watching The Bear last night, and there was an interviewing situation. I don't know if you've seen the show, but in
Mhm.
season 3, there's an interviewing situation where he turns the napkin a different way because he knows that it's really important because they're trying to get a 1 star on a Michelin star on their restaurant. He knows it's important for a server to see, wait a minute, there's something wrong with the table, right? So when we are hiring people, we're looking at adding people to our teams. There's a couple of things you can do. I'm also a certified DISC consultant. So I understand communication and patterns of communication, and knowing that we don't need a lot of D's or drivers on the team. We need some support people, and we need people who are going to encourage us. So you can look at those kinds of things, and there are actual tools you can use. But if you're just asking questions, knowing who you are, you can ask questions. For me, things like belonging and freedom of thought are my top core values. And so questions we can ask that will kind of give us an insight into who we're talking to might be, so what do you consider your non-negotiables in a job? What is the best way for people to communicate with you? Or, and those, they sound like benign questions, but when people
Mhm.
start answering, they're going to give you more information than you think. So becoming a
Mhm.
really good listener and knowing how to ask questions. For me, I might, when I'm adding a team, I'm a solopreneur. I have a couple of volunteer people who help, friends who help me, but that's just out of the goodness of their heart because they believe in my mission. But right now I'm a solopreneur. And so hiring someone, for me, it's going to have to be things like the areas of belonging.
Mhm.
What does it mean for you to belong somewhere? Or what would make you feel welcomed in this environment? And then they'll tell you those kinds of things. So I think when you take your core values, once you know them, and you turn them around and ask questions that might be things that would bother you. If respect is a big deal, then you might
Mhm.
say, when was the last time you felt disrespected in your workplace? Or what does it look like to disrespect someone in your workplace? Because those sound like
Mhm.
generic questions, but they
Mhm.
can be really, really helpful to help you identify who can be on your team. And I do want to point out, we don't need to all have the same core values
Mhm.
because we're all created individually differently, but we need to at least be with people who can honor those core values, right? Because core values should be reciprocal. If belonging is important to me as a core value, then I want you to belong too. So one of the words
Mhm.
I have whenever I meet with someone is I want to be welcoming. So I want them to feel like they belong, and I want to feel like I belong. So
Mhm.
when we look at it that way as well, that gives you an idea that it could be that someone has a skill set and maybe a core value that's a little bit different than mine. Finishing projects is not on the top of my list. It's like I need help with that. So persistence is, I'm not the most persistent person. So I can have a team member that has very different core values, but as long as we can honor each other's core values, then those are good. But when you put it out there's mission, your business mission and vision, um, all you have to do is ask people questions and just get really curious, and they'll tell you
Mhm.
more than you think they tell you.
Mhm. Right. Well, the main thing obviously is not to have opposing
Yeah, sure.
situations where someone is totally different. And I believe too, the same thing with skills and all of that too. We don't want to always have people that are all the same because
Hmm.
we need to have people that can do different parts of the business. But that's where I guess there is a difference between skills and
Hmm.
abilities and core values too. So how do you determine the difference between those two in terms of when you're trying to build your team?
Well, I think we're talking about hard skills and soft skills, and hard skills can be taught. But if you really need someone to have those hard skills, then you have to do a little more digging to know whether or not they're going to be compatible on your team. Understanding someone's disc behavior type is also going to help you. And that's something that you can get easily through me or through someone else. But it helps you understand how they're going to communicate with you and the things that they need. And because the disc particular behavioral analysis is based on 4 quadrants of extroversion, introversion, and task versus people, a lot of times core values are going to fall in those categories that for somebody like me who's an I, who is inspirational and interested in being around people, my core values are going to be more relational. And so if I need somebody who's going to be super detail oriented, then I wouldn't necessarily want another person who has all relational core values, because we will never get anything done. Right. So, but I think part of that is recognizing the difference between the soft skills and the hard skills, and learning how to recognize. And that's a thing that we have to learn how to do as hiring people as well.
Mm-hmm. So for those who really already have a team built and they want to say like, well, we haven't really been focusing on these core values, but we want to make sure we're implementing them. How do you effectively communicate that to your staff and integrate them into kind of what you're doing day to day, whether you're talking about with your customers or your internal team or, externally, how do you actually implement those well to make sure that everyone's on the same page?
Yeah, the discovering your core values is just the first step, right? Understanding who you are is the first piece, and then integrating them and implementing them in your life and in your business is the work that you'll do for the rest of your life. And I even I have a client that I'm working with. I talked to her yesterday and she said, we have one more meeting left. And she said, what is the one thing that you want me to know that maybe I'm missing? I'm like, I just want you to know that even though achievement is one of your core values, this is not an achievable thing that you're done with. This is not a finish line you cross. And she goes, oh, but when I work with teams, I usually start with the leader, whoever the leader of that team is. If it's a middle manager or if it's an entrepreneur, work with the leader, help them understand theirs, and then let them start implementing them in their life, and then see how they correspond to their business. Once we understand how they correspond to how they want the team to show up, I had one team leader to say, can I give them this core values exercise? And I said, sure. So she gave it to her team. They individually did it, then came together as a team and said, where do they overlap? And how does that determine how we want to show up as a team? And as a surgical team in a veterinary hospital, that was very important. And it became a very cohesive element for them. But that's one way to do it. But the other way is to actually just decide how you're going to communicate with your team. And as the leader, you get to say things like that. This is who I am. This is how I want us to show up in our business. I hope that this is the way we can continue to do business together, because evidently you've got a team that hopefully works well together. And when you start saying that I want to know what yours are, and I want to know how to best honor the relationship that we have and the core values that you have, if you're just looking for that for team cohesion, that's how you can do that. But if you want it to be implemented in your business for your clients and your customers, I actually interviewed on my podcast a woman who has been doing that for 14 years. And it was so refreshing to see somebody, because I work with newbies, brand new people who are just figuring them out. And to see someone who's done that for so long, and how it changed the way they do their website. It changed the way they show up with their customers. It changed the number of hours they put in. They went to a 30-hour work week for everybody. But it was because of the values that they have as a company. And she actually lost 1 or 2 team members along the way, but it made them so much more confident in who they were and how they could show up for their clients, that it made it so much easier to get through that learning process of how you hire people.
Right. And I think once you have identified that and you've been able to implement it in your company with the staff that you have, then it probably makes it easier when you're doing additional hiring, because you already kind of know what will work within the company structure that you have already, and kind of the culture you've been developing too. So, and like you said, it's going to change. Like you could have kind of what you think is that culture now, but then as people come and go, right, they're going to have different characteristics and different things. So it is going to be constantly changing. And like you said, it's never going to be done, right? Because of that. Right. And I guess, I think that's one of the things too, as leaders, we have to remember too, is like, it may not always be exactly what we picture in our mind because of that change, or like you said, the different characteristics, but focusing on those key ones that are the most important to us, and
Hmm.
maybe even helping our team develop skills, or
Yes.
those values. Maybe someone just needs some mentorship because they haven't had a lot of leadership in their own families before, or prior experience too. So
Right.
is there something you could tell us as leaders as well for our own company that can help us if there maybe are some challenges with someone that's on our team and we want to help them, get where we need them to be? Like, what do you recommend?
Well, one of the benefits of knowing your core values is it gives you the ability to set internal boundaries rather than external boundaries. And when we do that, we become less defensive. And like you
Mm,
said, I liked that. I loved what you pointed out. It's like, how do you know what's important and what you can let go? And so as leaders, we hear this pick your battles kind of thing. And
mhm,
it helps define those things very quickly. And uh, I can't tell you the number of clients that, oh, I've been the worst perpetrator on myself. And I've let these things happen, or, oh man, I messed that relationship up because I was not giving them the benefit of the doubt. And when you have the perspective on yourself and the awareness of yourself, then that opens up the ability to have more of a perspective and awareness of other people. And
mhm,
when you have a team member that maybe doesn't have any leadership skills or any awareness, the way that leaders get to mentor and train people on their staff, to me, is like an exciting privilege. Now, not everybody is that kind of leader, right? It's like it may be that you have somebody else on your staff that does that for them. But I think the most important thing is to be curious. The most important thing is to be kind and compassionate. And if you find those are not in your skill house or your wheelhouse or your skills, then that's something that you can develop in yourself. But I think curiosity is going to is going to win the day, right? Where
mhm,
did this come from? How did this happen? What is it that I'm doing differently that you don't understand? Because I hired you, therefore I value you. Always
mhm,
letting people know how much you care about them and that they are important. And a lot of times as entrepreneurs in small businesses, we're there to get it done, and we have bottom
mhm,
line to meet and we have things to do. But remembering that the people are literally what make your business. That was one of my conflicts with being in a very large university system. The people are on the balance sheet in the
mhm.
expense category. Like,
Right.
until you move the people to the asset category, we are going to have a problem. It's never
Mhm,
going to be what you want it to be. And I think remembering that as entrepreneurs, because we can get very bogged down in our businesses, we can get very overwhelmed sometimes, and it seems easy to replace people, but
mhm,
growing people is so much more beneficial in the long run, and it actually costs you less bottom line wise than hiring somebody new.
mhm.
So
Right.
yeah.
So I know we're coming to the end of the time we have together. So I'd love to ask if you have an offer that you would like to extend to our listeners. And also, if they want more information or they want to connect with you, how would they do that?
Sure, especially talking about core values. I have a free offer that if you go to my website, theintentionaloptimist.com, right above my head is two buttons. It used to be right above my head, but I've got a conference coming up, and so it's scooted over. But it says free core values exercise. And it's a one-page downloadable PDF that will kind of start you walking through the process. And that will many times is all people need. It's just something to help them think. It's a reframing of the way that they do it. If for some reason you need more than that, if you need help, I have a digital course. I have core values coaching, and I am available through my website or through DMing me on LinkedIn or Instagram. If you tell me that you heard me here on this podcast, I will know that it's not spam, and I will respond to you, because as a solopreneur, I do all of that stuff myself.
Right.
So I would love to hear from you, and if you just have questions, I'm happy to answer. I think that we have the information and we need to share it, and that is the best way to mentor people, is to just give them what we've got. So that's
Mhm.
the way I function.
Perfect. And would they find you like on LinkedIn or any of
Yep.
those just through your name or your company name, or what's the best way
Andrea,
to find you?
yes, Andrea Johnson and The Intentional Optimist, and I'm in Charlottesville, Virginia. And if you're looking and you're not sure if it's the right Andrea Johnson, I have a red or a blue banner. I have a business page around my picture that says "Ask Me About Live to Lead," which is the conference I'm putting on in the fall. So that's how you know it's me. And The Intentional Optimist will get you right there for my business page or my Instagram.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Andrea, for being a guest on my show and talking about this topic. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
And to the listener, if you enjoyed today's topic and you want to hear additional information, you can find access to exclusive content in the show notes. Thank you for tuning in today. Would you please share this episode with those you know and leave a review on your favorite platform? And if you find our show informative, would you consider being a financial sponsor to help me continue my mission to educate business owners? A link is located in the episode description, and no amount is too small. I'd really appreciate your support. If you are interested in connecting with our guest and receiving the offer they had to share, a link to our resource page is in the show notes. Finally, if you have any bookkeeping or payroll needs, reach out to us at 310-534-5577 or contact@abandp.com. My team and I are eager to assist you. Until next time, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Biz Help for You. Please join your host, Candy Messer, again next time. Have a terrific day.